Your presentation was really clear. It all flowed. Perfect narrative. I'd say 2 thumbs up. Let's do it. A couple questions. It's like you have this vast area of BLM land, and so I sort of want to say, well, what are the scenarios that could flow from this? And if you could develop those further in the next couple of weeks, give them an idea of where this might go in the future. Is it really possible? Is there enough water to really change the food system there, large scale? Does 640 acres make any kind of a difference if you could do that? Or do you really need to do 10,000 acres? And is that possible? That's the kind of thing I would want to see further developed.
We would like to be able to identify actual or quantify the amounts of each type of land, backyard and public spaces, and then the available plots or potentially available plots, and then see, based on productivity, how much of the food supply could that actually solve. And then moving on from there, we know that actually Arizona is a very agricultural state, but they happen to export all their food and import everything they eat. So sourcing things from nearby sources would be a very important factor. I doubt Ajo is not going to be able to produce all their food, at least in the near future. So how is that transition?
So I was wondering about climate adaptation, and is this region going to be viable in 50 years? Are you going to, what are the climate forecasts for this region? Generally, I understand that the arid parts of the world are going to become more arid, and some regions like New England, we're going to see fewer storms but more severe storms. And so, when you think about that's going to affect how we size our stormwater systems and all of that, and how we manage everything. Is that something you've looked at here?
A little bit. There was a recent amendment report filed with the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan that did look at climate predictions for the area, and like you said, they did anticipate a slightly hotter and drier climate, and that's certainly a concern. I don't know if it's something at this point we've addressed amongst ourselves in terms of how to address that, but I think it's something we've been kind of bouncing around. Is what does that mean?
Well, I'm not surprised you haven't solved global warming. I just think it's something interesting to consider, because I think there are going to be regions in the world that we're no longer going to be able to live in, and this might happen to be one of them. But not to say that you should give up on it. These people shouldn't be fed for the next however many years. But aside from that, I thought your presentation was really good, and I think that the systems you're considering, waste as a resource, and in capturing water when it is available and using it is certainly seems like the way to go. And it amazes me the link between city and imported food systems. Where people aren't locally based in their food systems, the disease and the diabetes and the poverty, those connections are just so remarkable. And to reverse those systems, you need to reverse, what you're talking about, bringing agriculture back. So, good job.
It's a large task you guys have to draw these different pieces together. But I really appreciated your presentation. I really did like as well the waste part, where you just talked about the assessment of the community available organic matter and how they could tie that back into the loop. I thought that was really important. I got a little bit lost in the water portion, because I felt like you have a map here of the wells which serve the city, and you told us where the city water comes from, and you also told me crops that were produced in the region that were for export, and you didn't really tell me how agriculture in the region now was using their water and where it was coming from and how that worked.
It's basically just drawing down the aquifer, and it has been a huge deal in Arizona in general, trying to manage water, and they're piping water from the Colorado River to supplement the areas where the aquifer is depleted beyond.
Right. And then so when you went back to talking about your parcels, you did mention at least one of them, I recall having a well there, so that seems like perhaps that clears up how you might be able to farm there, but I think there's maybe a little bit of a missing refinement to the assessment of like talking about the crops that you might grow and where the water is coming from for current agriculture and how that system works. At least as a listener, I got kind of lost. I was like, well, I know where people are getting their water from in the city, but I don't know exactly how the farmers are using it and what the future of that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, is that even
Well,
sustainable?
the problem
that
is
likely?
that we don't actually know. It's a huge aquifer system. I've done a lot of research trying to find out just exactly what is available in the immediate Aho area, and the data isn't there. And I was told basically there's they need to do a study. It's never been done before. And there are ways, it would probably cost some money to have that happen. But when the mine was in operation, there were documented declines in the aquifer. It is a recharge system, so a certain amount of it will rebound, but there's evidence that that's not occurring in other places where they expected it to occur in Arizona. So it's kind of unknown, really.
So all the farmers are drawing off of it through wells then, or are there water
Yes.
rights involved? I mean,
The water rights issue is not, in the active management areas in Arizona, that is an issue this is outside of an active management area, so you can use the water until it starts impacting
Okay.
other people, basically, that's the
Okay.
law, so.
all right. Yeah, that would have been helpful
Yeah.
to understanding the crop production. Yeah, that's excellent.
Thank you.
Am I up?
I think so.
I'm up, okay. I think it's a fascinating and looks like a really fun project. What's so nice about a lot of these arid region projects is they drive home the intermingling of nature and culture so nicely, right? So this, I noticed you've read Gary Nobhan.
Yes.
So you may have come across his description of the oases, the natural springs, where basically because they've been cultivated and tended, they've become biodiversity hotspots, right? So it's such a nice example of how human involvement is not, in essence, bad for nature, right? It's actually, there's some complementary there. So, and so the way you're dealing with the traditional agricultural methods and sort of things happening inside the settled areas, it draws on that general picture really nicely. I think one thing I was unclear on, and I may have missed it, but I'm not sure, is the relation of the prime farmland to the ownership map. Am I right in thinking that the bulk of that prime farmland was on BLM?
The bulk of it is, yes.
Okay, and are you basically assuming that cultivation on BLM land is a no-go?
Yes.
The people I've spoken to with BLM, I spoke to a couple people who said that's just, BLM considers agriculture a single use, even if it benefits wildlife or could be a community garden and involve recreational trails. It's
Really?
grazing is not. It was an issue that I had a little difficulty understanding. I left a couple messages for the
Ranchers have a big lobby.
for the
Yeah, exactly.
for the person who's been updating BLM's resource management plan that's due to come out, I think, in a year or two. And I just haven't spoken to that person yet.
Okay, that might be a really interesting piece to look into, because I think we're at a point where the traditional, like the last 50 years, sort of special interests involvement in federal lands is shifting, right? So we've now got renewable energy as a major interest in lobbying the BLM and other federal agencies to be able to put up solar arrays and things like that. And then we've got this local foods movement which has national momentum. We've got Michael Pollan, we've got Michelle doing vegetable garden in the White House lawn, all this stuff. So I'm just wondering if there might be some opportunities to explore and maybe even to try to find sort of the pressure points in that system so that there's a way to get the BLM on board with this. Because I think you're absolutely right. There's no reason, a priori, why growing crops is less suitable for BLM land than ranching, right? Especially when ranching has tended to really degrade large areas. So I wonder about that. It might be worth poking around a little bit. The other question I had is regarding the health issues and the diabetes. So I think it seems to me there's an implicit connection between having more produce available and healthy produce and the diabetes connection. So I'm assuming that's part of the picture. It seems to me you might be able to develop that a little bit further in fleshing out what are the causes for those obesity levels and the diabetes levels, and to what extent might local food be able to shift that, right? So it's probably not going to cure it, but maybe you can shift it. Am I right in thinking that with the odum that there's a physiological adaptation to periodic food shortages? They tend to put on body fat very quickly.
Yes.
Yes, basically. They do have their diabetes issues started with the introduction of processed foods.
So it's been sort of like all of this, but it's ramped up quite a lot. The problems are much bigger.
Basically, yeah.
They're physiologically adapted to process sugar more efficiently than average or non.
Okay. So that maybe is a digression. But anyway, if there's a way to be a little more explicit about the health stuff, because it shouldn't have jumped out as a huge issue here.
And in the partnership, there are groups that are specifically working on those tasks. So I guess summarize what they're trying to do.
Yeah. But it's a lovely piece of work.
More questions?
How much time we have?
Is there more time?
8 minutes left.
Oh, right through
Miss, what's your other questions on the